All right, so we are going to start looking at chapter 23, lessons 1 and 2. These are the first two lessons of Unit 3 over imperialism and World War One. So let's dig in. Early American foreign policy. So, the Revolutionary War happened. George Washington takes office. He is elected as president. He's reelected as president. He announces that he's not going to run again, and he gives a farewell address. The farewell address just sets forth some suggestions, advice, sage wisdom from an old founding father. And this puts the U.S. on a policy of isolationism for about 100 years' time. It's not a perfect policy. We did engage with other countries, but all more or less we kind of tried to mind our own business. Didn't stray too much from the continent. By the 1900s, though, that policy of isolationism has shifted to a policy of expansionism, and we start this with expanding westward from the Atlantic coast, obviously, to the Midwest and to the western U.S. and establishing these new states and territories there. And then it's expanding overseas. So we're going to these new countries overseas and adding territory and engaging with other countries. So an example of this is 1852 when President Millard Fillmore sends Commodore Matthew Perry with a squadron of naval ships, rolls in deep to this port in Japan near Kanagawa, which is about 30 miles or so from Tokyo. And they negotiate this treaty that is going to open two Japanese ports to American trade. Not only does it open it to American trade, but it also gives us some fortunate access to the ports for our naval forces. At this time, our Navy had increased in size. We needed more ports to give them access to. Age of Imperialism, the late 1800s, early 1900s, are known as the Age of Imperialism because this is when we are looking for new materials. We're looking for places to sell our goods, to trade our goods, those markets. And there were some Americans who wanted to become a world power. We wanted to, see some of that power from other countries that other countries had held on to for a long time. Others wanted to share Christianity. They wanted to push out civilization or civilized way of living with other parts of the world that were maybe less civilized in the eyes of Americans at the time. So, some leaders you want to be familiar with. William Seward, he arranged for the purchase of Alaska. We actually bought Alaska from Russia. He was actually laughed at first when he proposed that because it was an ice box. It was just a giant tundra. But ultimately, it was a brilliant decision from a number of standpoints, not the least of which is it doubled our territory at the time. The U.S. doubled in size by purchasing this, just because Alaska's so darn big. Josiah Strong is another one you want to know. He is kind of a manifest destiny guy. He believed that we were destined by God to expand both within the United States, within the continent itself, and then beyond the continent. That God wanted the U.S. to do this. James G. Blaine argued that it was important for economic growth, that getting access to those resources and then having places to trade was going to be good for the American economy. And then one last person you want to be familiar with is Alfred Thayer Mahan. He was a naval guy, military guy, and he argued about sea power. Again, that growth of the Navy, being able to have power on the seas against other countries that have well-established navies. So that was going to be really important for U.S. imperialistic attempts is to get more territory on access to ports and things. So that takes us to Hawaii. So we already know that we got a relationship going with Japan. If you know anything about geography, you know that Japan and the U.S. what's right in the middle is Hawaii. So in order to kind of build this trading post in the middle of the Pacific, the U.S. takes over the Midway Islands, the Samoan Islands, which are now known as parts of the islands known as American Samoa, and then the Hawaiian Islands. Now it's important to note, though, the takeover of Hawaii was primarily led by American businessmen. Guys like Sanford Dole of the Dole Fruit Company. They also were involved in sugarcane, harvesting at the time. Guys like him took over land and took over businesses in Hawaii. They kicked the queen out of power, and they ultimately annexed Hawaii to the U.S. This was a controversial move then and now. Hawaii was a sovereign country. They didn't invite us there. People just saw this and took it as an opportunity. And it's worth mentioning that, people who are native to Hawaii are darker skin tone. So there was a bit of xenophobia there in terms of not understanding different cultural groups and not having respect for different ways of living. They, American businessmen at the time just saw it as a financial opportunity and took advantage of that opportunity. So going a little bit further west, we're going to start talking about China here a little bit. So by the late 1890s, European countries, France, Great Britain, Germany, I believe, had some power there. Japan had carved out these spheres of influence in China. Ultimately, what those were, or they were like little like zones or regions almost, where those countries could do some trade. Now, the competition for economic control in China, number one, is causing tension among European countries because all these European countries are trying to vie for control there. But it's also causing some unrest within China itself because nobody asked the Chinese if any of these European countries could come in to sell their stuff. And so the U.S. is starting to pay attention, kind of for two reasons. One, they don't want war to break out in Europe or China. And two, because we're also not there and we want to have some access. If they can have access, well, we want to have access too. Secretary of State John Hay proposes what's known as the open door policy. It is basically what it sounds. Anybody can go into China and trade. Anybody can go into China and take resources and do whatever it is. Like, we're not going to fight with each other or compete over this space in China. But again, nobody asked the Chinese. So the Boxer Rebellion happens as a result of a secret society of Chinese natives rebelling against foreigners in China. It's worth reading up on. The Boxer Rebellion's pretty interesting. So back to Japan. Japan and Russia are fighting the Russo-Japanese War over a region or a province in China known as Manchuria. 1905, Teddy Roosevelt brings the Russian and the Japanese leader together in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, negotiates a peace treaty called the Treaty of Portsmouth. Again, nobody asked the Chinese if they wanted Japan and Russia to be involved in Manchuria, but it gets to a point where Roosevelt's got to step in. So they do the Treaty of Portsmouth. Japan and the U.S. are not super friendly right now, partly because of this Treaty of Portsmouth thing, but also because the number of Japanese people immigrating to the U.S., and then the discrimination that Japanese are facing when they get there. It's at this time in, history when we start limiting the number of immigrants that we're allowing to come in from certain countries. Japan was one of those countries, and the Japanese government was not happy about that. And then you've also got to factor in the Japanese that did come in were facing some pretty serious discrimination based on skin color and different cultural norms. Then the Japanese government was not at all pleased with that. So, some questions to consider. How did American foreign policy change? What were the causes of imperialist activity? How did the relationship between Hawaii and the United States change during this period? How did the United States gain access to China and Japan? How did U.S. imperialism in Hawaii compare to East Asia? So go ahead and pause the video for a bit, talk about these questions with the people around you, and then you are going to do quiz 23A. Good luck.